We're going to look at pegging prospecting licenses under the Wilson decision. For anyone that's not in this space, anyone that's not in this space, the Wilson decision was a sort of landmark High Court decision in 2017 that basically made 200 mining leases invalid, overrode a lot of DMIRS guidelines, and we're still suffering with it today. So you can't sort of say handing law conditions to High Court is not the wisest thing in the world to do. But it all started on Minderoo Station. To give you a bit of background here, there's a couple of little mining leases up here that a sand miner wanted to apply for. But to give you a bit of context, Minderoo Station was granted to the Forrest family in 1879, and it's about 230,000 hectares. Donald Forrest, that's Andrew Forrest's father, had to sell the station because of droughts and etc. Then when Andrew became a billionaire, he brought it back in 2009. He's later purchased Uluru, I should have practiced these names, and Natatura that are bordering these Minderoo. Andrew spent a lot of time as a jackaroo on the station, so he got quite a close affiliation with the land. Then this sand miner came along, Warren Slater, and he had a group of companies, Yarrie Mining and Onslow Resources, and wanted to start sand mining. So in 2011, there's been a series of cases against these guys that have just, I don't want to insult anyone from FMG or get myself sued here, there's been quite a bit of conflict between the two of them. So Minderoo Station, that's the picture on the left, is there, and it falls about there. Forrest has spent a lot of money on the station since he bought it, and he runs about 20,000 head of cattle and turns off about 5,000 head of cattle per year. And more recently, he's wanted to install a number of leaky weirs along the Ashburton River, but because of native title, it has been held up. So the sand mining leases are MO8478 and 479. They're only quite small. They're 3,000 hectares over the Ashburton River. Forrest lodged his objection on several grounds. Those top grounds there you see adversely affected the pastoral operations, deprived Forrest's use of the land, affected the viability of the pastoral objections and its improvements in revenue, and caused environmental damage on Minderoo and Ashburton rivers, and sterilised and degraded the land. It was nearly put on there as an aside that he objected on the grounds that the mineralisation reports weren't lodged at the same time as were required under Section 74. So when they changed the Act back in 2016, I think it was, that you're supposed to lodge a mineralisation, 2006, sorry, you're supposed to lodge a mineralisation at the same time you lodge a mining lease, or a mining proposal at the same time you lodge a mining lease. The warden threw it out, then it went up to a single judge of the Supreme Court, up to the full court of the Supreme Court, and then on to the High Court. Then the High Court handed down this Forrest versus Wilson decision, and the High Court said these words, coming out of a 84-page decision, both precise and prescriptive, conveying an intention not to countenance any degree of non-compliance. So from those 10 words, every Supreme Court judge in WA, and every warden has been following. There's no if, it has to be on anything. The immediate result of the decision was 200 granted mining leases were deemed invalid. I actually rang up the old company I was working for and said, can you check if we lodged that mining proposal at the same time when we lodged the mining leases? We had. I read the Act. There's a whole lot of mining lease applications were made invalid at the same time. Most of those have been repegged, but having said that, there's still 200 mining leases that are invalid floating around out there, unless they've been transferred. And in the case of the right hand not knowing what the left hand's doing, Fortescue's had to go and spend $1 million repegging that applications. This is not including rents, because he would have got the rent refunds, and it was all done by helicopter. So what does we go on to pegging tenure, and under section 59 of the mining regs, it says when you peg tenure, your post has to be 1 metre above the ground. There has to be 2 clearly identified trenches that are 1 metre long from the pegs, and a notice of marking out in the Form 20 must be firmly affixed to the datum post. Sounds really, really simple, doesn't it, if you want to go and peg? But it's a minefield, because we had another case of Forrest versus O'Sullivan where he wanted to peg some peas alongside the Ashburton River that he was going to convert later to mining leases. And this went to the warden first, then it went to the Supreme Court, and the trenches actually started 25 centimetres away from the post, some of them. Others had started 95 centimetres away from the post, which is completely contrary to section 29 we saw before. Forrest appealed to the Supreme Court, and Judge Tootle said marking out in the prescribed manner in the prescribed shape is an essential precondition of a warden's jurisdiction to determine application. So even before it goes to the warden, it has to be a valid application. So it's made marking out, you have to be very precise in marking out. I was having this, I'll go to, before I say that, I'll go to another section. Section 116 of the Mining Act was supposed to cure all ills before, once a tenement's granted, and not make the mining lease defeasible or any informality or irregularity of an application. It's supposed to cure that, but the High Court, in its decision, overruled this, and in an education on Machiavellian language, dismissed it, so it made all mining leases invalid if there's a mistake in your marking out or your Form 20. Yeah. So we go to Wyloo Metals versus Quarry Park, where they discuss section 116.2, and this is where Warren Slater, the Onslow Group, had one more trick up his sleeve to make his mining lease valid. He transferred them to Cauldron Resources, Cauldron Energy, and that actually, the transfer made the mining leases valid that were previously invalid, because once a registered person, I'll start from the start here. A person dealing with a registered holder of a mining lease will be protected by 116.2 from any attack upon the validity of the mining lease. The protection involves treating the grant of a renewal of a mining lease as a valid grant or a renewal. The interest in the mining lease obtained by the person dealing with the registered holder is immune from attack. So you get a mining lease granted. If it's been invalid, it becomes a valid. Work that one out. Just to walk through a few points here. This is Form 20 that you're supposed to affix to the datum post. We see the full name of the person on it, an address. It's a prospecting license. Then we go to the datum, description, then to the description of the boundaries and to the area, and most importantly, the time and date of marking out, let alone the signature of the applicant. Yeah. Then you can lodge a Form 21. You cannot lodge it manually, but you can also lodge it online. So we have our area up here, description of the datum and the description of the boundary. And if you were paying attention, you would have noticed that the description of the area is completely different to what we had on the Form 20. So we go back to the extent of validity, invalidity. It's nearly easier to say how not to peg than it is to say how to peg. So if the mining lease applications will be defective, and the warden will have no rights to hear this if the corner post is 2 centimetres short. I mean, that's that much. If it's too short, out of the ground, it's not going to be a valid mining lease application. The absence of a corner trench, you can either put in a row of stones or a trench. So they both have to be the same length. The trenches commence more than away from the post, 25 centimetres away from the post. The trench is not in the direction of the boundary. That's a difficult one to do if you've got a compass. The ground disturbances were not trenches. This is where guys have just sort of had their boots on and just kicked a hole in the ground. Someone's used someone else's trenches, an old trench they've just cleaned out. Though adjoining tenure posts and trenches can be used. So when you're pegging, you can use, if you've got your tenement there and it's another tenement sitting over there, you can put another trench in like that. Marking out the day before the expiry date, so the previous tenement hadn't expired yet and they've marked it out. Or you've marked out 3 days before their expiry date. We've seen that in another case I'm trying to think of, Bronzewing case, where they actually marked out 3 days after. Someone else has put their tenement in. Yeah. You can also make a tenement invalid by defective documentation. As I said, marking out 3 days and putting that on the form 20. Mistakes in the form 20 at the time of marking out, like the coordinates and the datum peg. This used to be all cured by Section 67 until the High Court came along. The Form 20 and the Form 21 having different application names. This is going back to the Bronzewing case, when Leith Beale actually had a different name on one compared to the other. the company wasn't registered, so they've lodged their application, then they've lodged the application for a company 3 days later. Yeah. The Form 20 didn't have a boundary description. So these are fundamental mistakes where the warden can't hear, or the registrar can't accept an application. The other possibilities of defective documentation is a mining proposal not signed off by qualified persons. The map is unsuitable that you have to lodge with the Form 21, or the rent or the application fee is incorrect. Going even further, when you're marking out, you usually have a small handheld Garmin that's within 3 meters, 5 meters of accuracy. So if 2 centimeters depth makes it invalid, does a 3 meter misdescription make it invalid? I better be careful what I say about DMIRS here too. So must DMIRS check everything that before a lodgement, or does it go to the warden who doesn't have any authority to hear these things? Does the department have to minutely examine each and every granted mining lease application? So what's the department doing in this? They put out a position paper, 14. I don't know actually where it went. Yes, there was supposed to be commentary on it throughout 2023. Then it's just disappeared off the radar. But it outlines that everyone is supposed to provide evidence of the marking out, photographic evidence of the posts and trenches with measuring tape next to it, and lodge that with the application form. This evidence will assist the mining register to establish that they have jurisdiction to consider the application. The position paper states that if a mining register is not satisfied of the evidence provided in strict accordance with the provisions of the Mining Act and Regs, the application will be invalid and refused. So they want evidence to prove time and commencement of marking out, the location details of each corner and angle of the boundary of marking out, the height of each post projects above the ground, length and direction of the trenches cut, location of the posts, and the completed form is attached in the Form 20. Yeah. You used to have to go and take the Form 20 and reattach it to the post, but they did away with that in 2006. So they might reintroduce that. This is a quote from Hopgood Gammon when the Wilson decision came down. WA has always had many active opportunists who look for and take financial advantage of any errors, omissions by tenement holders and applicants. We think it can be expected that Forrest and Wilson will bring such opportunists out in force. Hence the Truefeller case, where they didn't comply with the Section 58. Everyone's done 1 year work program forms, work programs and expenses. The department gives guidelines on it that only needs to be one year. Then these Truefeller come along and said, well, you need a 5-year plan. The funny thing about this was there was only 2 block E out in the middle of nowhere, wasn't worth much. But the same lawyer who had a competing E application over the top or not the lawyer, who had the mining company who had the same competing application over the top, who brought that action, then had to defend his application for the exact same reasons, and the lawyer was arguing the opposite. You just got to love the law. So I just picked this data out from Land Tracker due diligence, and all for the current 6,600 current pending tenement applications, there's been 4,700 objections lodged. That's 70% of all tenements lodged get an objection. This is only current pending tenements. I didn't go in any further than that, otherwise I would have had to go through the whole 4,700 tenements to sort it out. But what I was able to pull out, I don't know if you can see it very well up there, is the numbers. Oh, they're fine. Yeah. Sorry, when I was looking at my computer, I thought I might have to look a bit closer. But mining companies have lodged 2,000 objections. That's 500 mining companies lodged 2,000 objections. But you have to remember some of these are ballots. But I noticed on Stefan's there was only, his figures are only 47 ballots or something. So there's a high percentage of pastoralists who got into the Act and started lodging objections. But you have to remember a few of them are large mining companies. Then I pulled out the opportunists that Hopgood Gammon were talking about. This is a bit discretionary, this figure, but I'm not naming who I pulled out. The native title parties that got in on the boat. The energy companies that got into the Act as well, probably to protect their gas pipelines. The government even lodged a few. Local governments and the Enviro companies, not companies, but organisations. But you can see the top five companies have also lodged over 1,000 tenements, 900 objections as well. So there must be something significantly wrong with our Mining Act that all these companies are clogging up the Warden's Court with all these objections. But what's the government doing about it? You can throw more money at the Warden's Court, like the government suggested, or you can amend the Mining Act. The most logical one would be to expand the Section 116 powers so they act like they were normally, so they're used like they were used originally. Give greater definition to the land types and the relationships between the land types. So every time someone lodges an exploration license over a miscellaneous license, someone have to lodge an objection. Is under the miscellaneous license section of the Mining Act, there's quite a big definition of what you can and can't do. That could be broadened quite easily. Pastoral leases are just leases anyway, but Wilson has really brought these out to the fore. If they spell what pastoral leases can and can't do, it help. Or the Mining Act at the moment has rules where you can't go within 400 metres of a house or a watering point currently. So I don't see why they can't just add a little bit more of that type of legislation in. We won't touch native title parties. The government also suggested that fees be charged for lodging objections, but in the strength of things, $1,000 objection for BHP is not going to matter whether it's $1,000 or $20,000. They're going to lodge an objection. Change legislation in light of the Truefeller case. This is going up to the Supreme Court, so we might get a little bit more definition around that anyway. But still, do we need to peg tenements? I mean, oh my God, we stopped pegging miscellaneous licenses years ago. Is there has to be another way we can do this. Exactly the same as the exploration licenses, just have little graticular Ps. Yeah. So, but going forward until it's resolved, accuracy in pegging and documentation is paramount importance. And I think this will be really, really important going forward, because the discrepancy of your Garmin against your pegs. I was having a conversation earlier today where someone said their surveyor rounded up their description up to the nearest metre. You'd mount a good argument that was an invalid application. Yeah. In light that you only need 2 centimetres to make a mining lease application invalid. The government should step in and start controlling the expansion of the numbers of the objections. It should get I'm surprised that by now they haven't got something out there. They've had since 2017 to do something about it, and remembering that there's still 200 mining leases out there that are still invalid, and they can't get them fixed because they have to run it through the Native Title Act. So is that illegal mining? Yeah. So, and you have to consider the delays this is causing development timelines, and no answers are forthcoming. Yeah. So if you want to talk a little bit more about this or how we extracted that data, Darren, give us a call.